The Joint Task Force probe ship, Harmony's Edge, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler sector, its advanced sensors immediately beginning their search for clues. The vessel was a marvel of cooperative engineering, Vortani stealth technology, crystalline sensor arrays, hegemony defensive systems, and human computational architecture all working together in perfect harmony. Marcus Chen stood on the bridge, watching the sensor displays with the same calm attention he had shown during the emergency session. Beside him, Prince Zexhai monitored the Vortani systems, his 4 hands dancing across control interfaces with practiced grace. The past 2 days of preparation had forced them to work closely together, and the prince had discovered that the humans' technical knowledge was far more extensive than anyone had realized. "Gravitational sensors are picking up the same anomalies," reported Lieutenant Commander Veltar, the crystalline officer at the science station. "They're stronger here, more organized." Marcus studied the patterns flowing across his displays. "It's definitely artificial. The fluctuations have a rhythm to them, almost like a heartbeat." Captain Korthek, a veteran hegemony officer with decades of deep space experience, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "In all my years exploring unknown regions, I have never seen gravitational manipulation on this scale. What could generate such power?" "Something big," Marcus said quietly. He adjusted the sensor parameters, filtering out background radiation to focus on the anomalous readings. "Very big." Prince Zexhai watched the human work. Noting the way Marcus seemed to instinctively understand the complex interactions between different sensor systems. The prince's own training had been thorough, but it was academic, theoretical knowledge gained in controlled classroom environments. Marcus displayed the kind of intuitive grasp that only came from years of hands-on experience with real problems. "Contact!" Lieutenant Commander Veltar announced suddenly. "Massive object bearing 27 Mark IV, distance approximately 50,000 kilometers." The main screen shimmered and resolved into an image that left the entire bridge crew speechless. Floating in the darkness of space was a structure unlike anything in the galactic databases, a vast sphere of crystalline material that seemed to bend light around itself. The sphere was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, and it pulsed with internal energy that created the gravitational distortions they had detected. "By the 7 suns," Captain Korthek whispered. "What is that thing?" Marcus was already analyzing the sensor data, his fingers moving quickly across his control interfaces. "It's hollow," he said after a moment. "The gravitational field isn't coming from the sphere itself. There's something inside it." "Can we get closer without being detected?" Prince Zexhai asked. "The Vortani stealth systems should mask our presence," Captain Korthek replied. "But I recommend extreme caution. Whatever happened to those 3 ships could happen to us." Marcus nodded agreement, but he was studying something else on his displays. "Captain, I'm reading some kind of transmission coming from the sphere. It's not directed at us, more like an internal communication system." "Can you decode it?" "Working on it." Marcus's expression was intensely focused as he rerouted processing power through the ship's hybrid computer systems. The human computational architecture began working in conjunction with crystalline pattern recognition matrices and Vortani quantum processors. Prince Zexhai moved closer, watching the decryption process with fascination. The human was using techniques he had never seen before, not the brute force approaches typically employed by advanced civilizations, but something more elegant and adaptive. "I've got partial translation," Marcus announced. "It's definitely a communication system, but the language is old. Very old. Some of the root structures match patterns from the predecessor ruins we've found throughout the galaxy." A chill ran through the bridge crew. The predecessors were a legendary species that had supposedly vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind only scattered ruins and tantalizing hints of incredibly advanced technology. Most species believed them to be extinct. "Are you saying this sphere belongs to the predecessors?" Captain Korthek asked. "I'm saying it's using their technology," Marcus replied carefully. "Whether it belongs to them or someone else who found it, that's a different question." Lieutenant Commander Veltar's crystalline form suddenly blazed with alarm. "Captain! Something's happening to the sphere!" The massive structure began to shift, its crystalline surface reconfiguring itself with fluid grace. Sections of the sphere became transparent, revealing the interior, and what they saw there explained everything. Inside the sphere was a ship, but not just any ship. It was clearly of predecessor design, angular and elegant, covered in the same hieroglyphic patterns found in ruins throughout the galaxy. The ship appeared to be damaged, its hull cracked in several places, leaking energy into the surrounding sphere. "It's a rescue operation," Marcus said suddenly, understanding flooding his voice. "The sphere isn't a weapon, it's a recovery system. Someone built it to contain and study that damaged predecessor vessel." "But who?" Prince Zexhai asked. "And what does this have to do with the missing ships?" Marcus was already running new calculations, correlating the gravitational distortions with the sphere's energy output. His expression grew grim as the picture became clear. "The containment system is failing," he announced. "The gravitational field that holds the predecessor ship is becoming unstable. When other vessels get too close, they're being pulled into the sphere and disintegrated by the energy discharge." "So the missing ships," Captain Korthek began, "were accidents, side effects of a containment system that's breaking down." Marcus turned to face the captain, his expression serious. "And if we don't do something soon, that predecessor ship is going to break free. The energy release could destroy everything within 100 light years." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Prince Zexhai felt his world shift as he realized they were facing a crisis that could affect billions of lives across dozens of star systems. "What can we do?" the prince asked quietly. Marcus was already working on his displays again, running simulations and calculations at a speed that impressed even the Vortani neural-enhanced prince. "The containment field needs to be stabilized, but it requires precise gravitational manipulation. One mistake and we trigger the very catastrophe we're trying to prevent." "Do we have the technology for such precise work?" Captain Korthek inquired. "Individually, no. But together..." Marcus gestured to the hybrid systems around them. The Vortani gravity generators, combined with crystalline precision sensors and hegemony power distribution systems, might be able to create the exact field harmonics we need. Prince Zexhai studied the humans' calculations, his enhanced mind processing the complex mathematics. The solution was elegant, but incredibly risky. A single miscalculation would mean the destruction of their ship and everyone aboard. "You're talking about manually adjusting gravitational fields while inside an unstable containment sphere," the prince said slowly. "The margin for error is essentially zero." "That's right," Marcus replied calmly. "And it has to be done by someone who understands how all these different technologies work together. Someone who can adapt when the unexpected happens." The prince looked around the bridge, noting the expressions of his fellow crew members. They were all highly trained, competent officers, but they were also specialists in their own species' technologies. None of them had the broad, adaptive knowledge necessary for this kind of improvised solution, except for Marcus. "You're volunteering to do this yourself," Prince Zexhai said. It wasn't a question. "I'm the logical choice," Marcus replied simply. "I've worked with gravitational manipulation systems before, and I understand how these different technologies interact." Captain Korthek clicked his mandibles in distress. "The risk is enormous, Marcus. If you make a mistake..." Then we all die anyway when the containment fails, Marcus finished. At least this way, we have a chance. Prince Zexhai found himself studying the human with new eyes. 3 days ago, he had dismissed Marcus as a primitive being from a backward world. Now he was watching someone calmly volunteer for what was essentially a suicide mission to save billions of lives he had never met. "I'll help," the prince said suddenly. Marcus turned to look at him, surprised. "Your Highness, this is extremely dangerous. You need someone to monitor the Vortani systems while you coordinate the overall field adjustments," Prince Zexhai interrupted. "My neural enhancements give me the processing speed necessary to make real-time corrections." For a moment, Marcus just stared at the young prince. Then he nodded slowly. It would help to have someone who understands the gravity generation systems intimately. The next several hours tested everyone aboard the Harmony's Edge. They maneuvered carefully into position around the failing sphere, using every stealth system at their disposal to avoid triggering additional gravitational distortions. Marcus worked with focused intensity, coordinating the efforts of 3 different species technologies, while Prince Zexhai managed the delicate Vortani gravity generators. The work was incredibly complex. Every adjustment had to be calculated precisely, taking into account the sphere's fluctuating energy output, the predecessor ship's own gravitational field, and the interaction between all the systems aboard their probe ship. Several times, cascading failures nearly destroyed them, only to be prevented by split-second corrections from either Marcus or the prince. As they worked, Prince Zexhai began to understand something about humans that no intelligence report had ever captured. It wasn't that they were more advanced than other species. In many ways, they were clearly behind. But they possessed something else, something that might be even more valuable. Humans were adapters. They took whatever was available and made it work, often in ways its original creators had never intended. Marcus wasn't just using the different technologies aboard their ship. He was thinking like all of them at once, seeing connections and possibilities that specialists missed. "Field stabilization at 60%, Marcus announced, sweat beading on his forehead despite the bridge's cool temperature. "The resonance pattern is holding, but we need more precise harmonics on the tertiary generators." Prince Zexhai's 4 hands moved across his controls with machine-like precision, his neural enhancements allowing him to process data faster than normal biological systems could manage. But even with his advantages, he found himself struggling to keep up with the human's intuitive understanding of the complex interactions. "Tertiary generators responding," the prince reported. "Field coherence improving." "Good. Now we need to gradually reduce the overall field strength while maintaining harmonic stability. If we drop it too fast, the predecessor ship breaks free and kills us all," Prince Zexhai finished. "I understand." They worked in synchronization, the young prince following Marcus's lead as they slowly, carefully, began to power down the failing containment system. With each adjustment, the risk increased, but so did their chance of success. "Field stabilization at 90%, Lieutenant Commander Veltar reported. "The predecessor vessel's gravitational signature is becoming coherent." "Almost there," Marcus said quietly. His hands never stopped moving across his controls, making minute adjustments that kept their improvised solution from falling apart. "Just a little more." And then, suddenly, it was done. The massive crystalline sphere around the predecessor ship solidified into a stable configuration, its gravitational field contained and controlled. The ancient vessel hung peacefully in its crystalline prison, no longer a threat to passing ships. The bridge crew sat in stunned silence for a moment, hardly believing they had succeeded. Then Captain Korthek began clicking his mandibles in the hegemony equivalent of cheering, and the celebration spread throughout the ship. Prince Zexhai slumped back in his chair, mentally exhausted despite his enhancements. He looked across at Marcus. who was calmly checking system readings as if they had just completed a routine maintenance task. "How do you do that?" the prince asked quietly. "Do what?" Marcus replied, not looking up from his displays. "Remain so calm when everything could go wrong at any second." Marcus finally turned to face the prince, and for the first time, Prince Zexhai saw something other than quiet confidence in the human's eyes. There was tiredness there, and perhaps a hint of the fear he had kept hidden during their desperate work. "I've learned that panic doesn't solve problems," Marcus said simply. "And usually, there's a solution if you're willing to look for it hard enough." Prince Zexhai nodded slowly, understanding now why the human had walked away from his insults 3 days ago. Marcus hadn't been afraid or too primitive to respond. He had simply recognized that the prince's words were not a problem worth solving. "I owe you an apology," Prince Zexhai said. "A real one, not just diplomatic courtesy. I misjudged you and your species badly." Marcus studied the young prince for a moment, then smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Prince Zexhai had seen from him. "Apology accepted. And for what it's worth, you did excellent work on those gravity generators. Your people's technology is impressive." "Technology is only as good as the mind that guides it," the prince replied. "Today I learned that wisdom can come from unexpected sources." As the Harmony's Edge began its journey back to the assembly, carrying news of their success and data about the predecessor discovery, Prince Zexhai found himself thinking about the broader implications of what had happened. The galaxy was vast and full of species with different strengths and perspectives. Perhaps it was time for the Vortani Empire to start learning from their neighbors instead of just ruling over them. And somewhere in the diplomatic quarters, Marcus Chen was already planning improvements to the containment system, his mind moving on to the next problem that needed solving. Because that's what humans did. They found solutions, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. The 19-year-old prince had learned a lesson that would shape the rest of his life. True strength came not from the power to command others, but from the wisdom to recognize when others had something valuable to teach.